Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next episode of the Company Road podcast. It gives me great pleasure to announce our next guest, Sarah Mote. You're a senior product designer at Bendigo Bank and lead product designer for Instant Scripts. And you've given me a bit of background, so I'm just going to explain what you've shared with me. So your childhood dreams were in the realm of art and design, and they led you to study fine art and industrial design. You've been on many adventures around the world, a bit of travel in and around Italy, England, where I'm from, and around the Oral-B Braun design team in Kronberg, which looks like a lovely place. I was just looking at it on Wikipedia. Looks very cool, looks very German, but the birthplace of industrial design. And yeah, looking at Dieter Rams' philosophy of less but better, which became a bit of a guiding principle for you. And it really felt like, from your description, it was influencing your design approach, helping you to prioritize simplicity and effectiveness. As well as the other work that we've mentioned, you do mentoring work at Monash University, Melbourne Uni, Academy XI and ADP List, and you share your expertise with other people. You like cooking a little bit. You've talked a bit about your passion for culinary experimentation. I don't know what to describe it as, but it's something to do with the microwaved egg and finding perfection in that way. So not sure whether that worked out or not, but maybe we'll come back to it. And ultimately, your goal is to continue shaping and contributing to the design world and crafting exceptional experiences, pushing boundaries of creativity in one way or another. So it's really lovely to have you on board.
Oh, thanks, Chris, for inviting me. It's great to be able to speak on a podcast, and quite excitingly, it's my first podcast.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, this is really exciting. This is where it all starts for me, the company road.
Thank you. Let's figure out where to begin. So maybe we could start with, we've talked a bit about the boundaries of creativity, and you're obviously educated in a creative area. If you think about fine art and industrial design, I'd love to just hear about any stories relating to your creativity and how it all began for you. Maybe we just start there.
So, well, there's this gorgeous video that happened when I was about in year 1 or year 2 at school. I've always been, out of my brother and I, the one that's been painting and drawing and stuff. And then at school, this video, they went around asking people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there's people like, oh, I want to be a family lawyer, marine biologist. And then there's little Sarah with her little fringe and a Legionnaire's cap on going, oh, I want to be an artist. I think when my parents watched that, it was, oh no, what sort of career has she got ahead of herself? How's she going to support herself? But yeah, that's really where I think my story always starts, is it's been with me since little. And I know a lot of people say that, but I actually have proof that I want to pursue that career as an artist. And I always say, like, I got through to middle school, high school, and sort of learned about this thing called design. And I was like, oh, what's the difference between design and art, really? And the line always, I think, is always blurred. But I found out about architecture, like that was a job. I heard about interior architecture. I was like, oh, that's amazing. And it was not until my mum dragged me to university open days in year 9 that I actually found out about industrial design and realised, oh, creating products is actually a job done by designers, not just engineers. And I fell in love with the whole concept then. Maybe it was the lecturers there, Mark Richardson and Selby Coxon, who were there, that were just amazing. Seeing a female who was interested in designing physical products and human interaction. And so it all started there, really. And then it just sort of continued. So I got to study at the Victorian College of the Arts, fine art photography, because I have this passion for photography. Haven't had much time for it over the last long time because I've just been embedding myself completely into this design world. Additionally, it just came to mind, my mum's got at home this drawing that I did at art class of a Goosebumps story, like a reaction sort of piece of like a house and a cat and stuff. And I remember her telling me that this was the piece where the teacher that was giving feedback, he went to my mum and said, oh, Sarah's got some real talent. You really need to embrace this and continue it. And that piece, she actually got framed, and it's a piece that I need to bring over here to my plain white walls. But yeah, it really started at a young age and just being off with the fairies and creative.
That's obviously the beginning of it, and it followed you through to the world of business, I'm sure, as well. If you think about creativity and maybe including your childhood time as you were describing it, a lot of people say that children are very much more open-minded than adults. When it comes to experiencing things, they'll give it a go, essentially. And sometimes when you get older, obviously, judgment kicks in. You're a bit more cautious. You're a bit worried about what other people think. If you're not considered an expert in something, you're less likely to try something out. I'm curious to know whether that was something that you experienced or whether you've been able to continue with your creativity. What do you feel was the most creative part of your career so far, or maybe your life?
I feel really accomplished by having created a piece for White Knight in 2015 and showcasing that to the City of Melbourne, being recognised by the Age paper as being like one of the top 10 things that you must go see at White Knight, and just the influx of Instagram and social media posts that people were taking and the delight of people coming in and interacting with the work. It was an extension of my industrial design thesis of interactive hydroponic plants, which sounds really funky, but it's based off research from Disney. I grabbed some friends to try and help me make this bigger, and we put it on in the rotunda at the Botanical Gardens and had a bunch of plants that people were able to come up and touch and interact with, and that change the lights and the soundscape and things like that. But to your point of how do you keep creativity going and not losing that scariness sort of being presented with a white page, it's certainly happened. Industrial design, for me, you're around people, other extremely talented people when I was in industrial design, and people above you and below you, but you suddenly get immersed into this world with other really great creative people and talented people. And so there are some people that are really great at drawing automotive stuff, some really great at drawing products, but some people are really great at 3D modeling or actually physically making the models. And so everyone had their strengths. And I always had hesitancy to do things because of that imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough. At school, I was really confident with what I was making and creating because you sort of get recognised as being Sarah's the art kid. But then when you're around everyone else, you're like, oh gosh, yeah, maybe I'm not as creative. Maybe I'm not as good anymore. I feel like the ways that I begin to overcome that definitely in the workforce is just having fun and having play. It was something I've been thinking about more and more. As I was really fortunate to go to my old high school and hear from some great women, and one of those people was Kathy Kiss, and she has contributed a lot to playground design and development and childhood development and things like that. And she spoke about how important it is to have that play because we stimulate creativity and thoughts and problem solving and things like that. And so culturally, when going into a job and looking for things, what's their team dynamics like? What's a workplace like? They've got to be having fun because that's part of my practice. That's how you problem solve and that's how you create. Certainly for me, the best results out of me is having a good old chuckle and going on tangents as well.
Yeah, can we talk about, I guess, the way in which that was received in some of the places that you've been? Obviously, imposter syndrome is a real thing, particularly in the creative industries, where I don't know if it's that somebody's doing something different. It feels like any kind of tangential thought, because it's being presented in a different way and people got different ideas, and then you get into this weird space of, well, I don't know, is my idea better than their idea? And then ultimately it's just an idea. It's quite a precious arena sometimes. So I'm just wondering how you navigate that for yourself based on your experience, really.
When going into a workplace, it can be challenging depending on the dynamics. And sometimes I've been known to come in as a ball of chaos coming in of fun to disrupt. And maybe that's possibly why people have hired me, because they got wind of that. Certainly at MYB, I've quickly found some people, because when you're that person and working remotely as well, it can be tricky to connect. And through COVID times as well, starting different jobs was really tricky. But going into Slack groups, into the channels, and there was a design one, of course, and I just started talking and sharing things that I'd found, being like, does anyone want to talk to me? And no one really was talking. And I was like, geez, this is a tough crowd. But then a couple of the designers, they were like, no, we really like it. We just don't know what to say, sort of thing, or we've got nothing else to share. But they said, oh, hey, go check out like the dogs channel and the cats channel. But more importantly, MYB had this great channel called the Yelling channel, and you had to do caps lock all the time. No, if you got lowercase, you got kicked out, which is amazing. And no context was the best way of doing it. Quite often when I start talking, I sometimes forget to give the context of what I'm talking about. And so I just start saying stuff. That's where sort of one of my friends directed me to this Yelling channel. It's just like, go talk there, but do it all in caps. I made some great friends there who embraced that so much so that they even created a no context Sarah channel, which was all the highlights, because it wasn't just in Slack, it was also in person. They'd be like, what? because I just call people and I'll be like, oh, hey, so got a quick question. Just got a quick question. So culturally, some places well received. Really fortunate at NAB in home lending. I landed with a incredible team of people where they embraced my chaos and joking around and collaboration and everything else like that. It's certainly been difficult being more of a single designer at Bendigo Bank, where it's myself and my manager. We did have another designer, but he's moved on to a different project and doesn't work with us directly anymore. So that's been much harder. Excitingly, though, at the moment, there's a design practice in the works of being created because Bendigo Bank doesn't have one. And so that opportunity presented itself to be able to go, hey, we can create our own cool culture and fun times and do good things and help the business as well. And that's always been the cool thing for me, is culturally, of like finding people who aren't even in design that also want to be part of the banter during the day and problem solving on projects. And that's design really for me as well, of like bringing people together to solve these cool problems. And it's quite amazing the people that you attract as well.
I'm really fascinated by that journey and also the transition of the company and the companies that you're describing, because what you're saying about your background and the play and the creativity and all the things that you've mentioned, it's fantastic. And then you kind of bring it back to reality where you're talking about MYOB, who does accounting software, NAB, and now Bendigo Bank. As a creative person, how do you get attracted to what are quite traditional or conventional institutions in some people's books?
Oh, gosh. Well, partly because I don't understand them and my inquisitive nature to be able to understand it. Like, I dropped science, geography, history, language, you name it, I dropped it at school. I was really fortunate to go to a school where they could cater for that. It's probably also the only way that they got me to finish school, to be honest. Yeah, so it's the inquisitive side of like, what's a home loan? How can I be better at my own banking? What is accounting software? Like, I was really fortunate. I grew up in a family business that sold toilet paper and cleaning chemicals. This was my dad's business. And so my holidays were filing invoices and answering telephones, picking stock. So I understood the basics of things, but I really haven't understood all the other bits and pieces. And I've always felt like the complexity around these things, if I didn't understand it, how else are there are surely other Sarahs out there that don't know these things, and how can I make it more accessible to people like myself, people with other disabilities or learning, whatever it be? How can this be easier for you, and how can we present this in a better way? And that stems, I think, from designing products. So you've got to understand the human body. So it's the same as like understanding the human body, understanding the human mind, and that we've all got different ways of learning. I'm a visual spatial sort of learner. If you give me an instruction list to follow something and it's not written down, it's certainly in one ear, out the other. Like, I'm just like nodding my head for days. Going into banking again, though, straight after NAB, was also something that I questioned to go to Bendigo. I was like, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this again? Am I really challenging myself? Am I growing enough? And it's certainly a different type of banking that I've gone into. It's not home lending, which I actually really am quite passionate about home lending because of the complexities around it. And I think that everyone should have access, get a home, have a roof over their head. Everyone should be able to live safely and comfortably. And I know it's as much of an Australian home dream to be able to do that. So that's what interests me about home lending, and continues to interest me, the complexities around that process as well. It's wild depending on which state you're in and what's all these different terms and how do you understand it. You don't get taught those things at school. That's home lending. But the part at Bendigo Bank is I'm doing things with term deposits, customer onboarding to be able to get an account open. What's a term deposit? What does this mean for me? And financial freedom runs on money. Even artists, they need to pay for art supplies and other things like that. So how can they be able to afford to do the things that they want to do? And the other attraction to me about Bendigo Bank was obviously the Up Bank was acquired by Bendigo a little while ago, and the incredible work that's going there, that they're doing at Up. That's their whole ethos as well, of helping young people have financial freedom and be able to save and be able to afford and know where their money's going. And so that's amazing as well to be able to be part of, and aligns really well with Bendigo's community banks. I don't know how many people actually realise how Bendigo works with their community branches and what that means. But the money that goes into the community branches, you get assigned sort of a branch when you sign up. typically. And that money feeds back into the local community to build sports centres, to build theatres, to whatever it be needed for the community, to support a sports club, to be able to give the kids soccer t-shirts or whatever it be, things like that. There's decisions that are made. And so giving back to the community. And I know big banks do their own ways of different things, but there's a whole model, I guess, around Bendigo Bank, which is, again, still far too complex for me. I'd probably say go speak to someone else there who understands all the ins and outs of it. But the base of it really sits well with me, and where I think I can continue to add value and thinking about the future of banking and what that looks like. There's obviously the phase of cryptocurrency and all that sort of jazz, which I'm not going to get into, but how can I go do my banking and not be having to go to a branch? How can I get advice from people from the bank sitting at home on my couch here and at the time that works for me because I have a young family, or depending on what my lifestyle was like, having that accessible to be able to do my banking and understand my finances when I'm ready to. So I have interests as well in the medical world as well, like Instant Scripts is sort of the other balance that I have that I'm very fortunate to. Instant Scripts is a telehealth online script consultation website app started by a dear friend of mine, Asher Freilich, and he's done very well out of it. He sold it recently to Wesfarmers for a large sum of money, which is amazing. And it's been incredible to be part of that journey from the very beginning. I remember sitting with him having a drink, and he was just telling me about this idea that he wants to get going. And I was like, you're going to need some design help. And he was like, yeah, I know. It's one of these things. And it's sort of been amazing to be able to do that. So I do my 9 to 5 Bendigo Bank and everyday job. And then in the evenings, a couple of nights a week, myself and now another couple of other designers I've got on board, we chip away at uplifting and building Instant Scripts more, which is great. And it's been an amazing journey or adventure, I'd say, or as I prefer to say. It's been an adventure to go from the very beginning of really not knowing some medical stuff, but really understanding more about who the customer is. Everyone should have access to healthcare. So how can you do that through a digital platform?
Oh, some great stories there. I love the work that you're describing and the passion with which you're describing it as well, because I think that your curiosity has led you to the solution. I'm sure it's not always easy to get to that solution. And there have probably been many things that you've had to go through to get to those points. But actually, it's about possibility. And if you can see possibility in the situation in which you live and work, then follow your nose and your intuition a little bit, and ultimately you can get to something that's really amazing, which is really cool to hear about. Just interesting to me that this show is all about entrepreneurs and how the listeners are often within corporates and they're in big organizations and they're trying to make change possible, and it can be quite difficult. We're often quite focused in these conversations around what happens inside that organization and what they do to achieve certain results and so on. But it's great to hear from you that you're doing things outside of that probably not only achieve other things outside of work, but also enrich what you're doing within work. Is that something that you've always kept as a bit of a balance?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just inherent in my nature to be able to do that, to have that balance. My mum's always saying, like, Sarah, do you really need to take on more? And I'm like, oh, well, I could just help a little bit here and maybe add a little bit of guidance here. I think I can add something, and that sort of balance between things.
On the topic of completing things, a lot of people have got tons and tons of ideas, but they never get to see anything through. Do you feel like you pick the ones that you want to do and you see it through, or do you feel like you always just got loads of ideas?
I hope my manager's not listening at the moment, because he'd be chuckling real hard at me. Well, any of my managers, I think, that I've had over the time, and anyone really that knows me, any dear friend that knows me, I start things and then half do them, and then they get parked for a second because I get distracted by the next shiny thing. So it's quite an accomplishment for me to stay in jobs for the stints that I do and finish these projects and get through things. It's a real satisfaction. Certainly when I do get that, and deadlines are really helpful, I think. Like, there's work at the moment that I'm doing internally at Bendigo, and I just need to just focus on it. But I'm like, but I could help there as well, and I could do a bit of this and a bit of that. And I think that's where I always come back to get the best. Like, I say this in interviews, is that to get the best out of me is to put me with some other people who probably can keep a straight line. I'm trying to get better constantly at it. But yes, it's like, this could lead to here and la la la. And so culturally, it's finding those people and working collaboratively to be able to get the best out of me, because that's what they also people go, oh, your brain works real good. That's exactly what they say. They obviously like me enough to get me onto this place to work and solve some juicy problems. It does help when I've got some friends around me to be like, hang on, let's stay on task here and not get distracted by all the pretty things that you think that, oh, this could be done and that could be done.
No, this thing, it comes up a lot, particularly within the creative fields and people that work within creative industries as well, or just in a creative role. Creativity is part of your role. Then you've got to come up against distraction, procrastination. You've just got ideas all the time. So going back to the uni times when you're a student and the only thing to focus you was really a deadline and you're having to do it by yourself. Now you're in the world of work. It's actually quite helpful in a way that you can assemble a team knowing that other people have got different working preferences. You say, okay, well, just match me with these 3 other people that are just like, I've got 1 PM, I've got 1 BA, I've got this and that. And all of a sudden you've got the perfect formula of divergent and converging practices, basically, where stuff gets done. So
Exactly.
Yeah. So that must be helpful. And obviously reassuring that you can still bring your creativity through, but also be safe in the knowledge that something's actually going to made of it, because that's where everything's going.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So we're talking a bit about boundaries maybe, but where do creativity boundaries sort of start and finish for you in a work context? Because for you, it must be, like we were just saying, it must be harder to maybe focus on certain things and just really dedicate your mental energy to that. Do you find yourself having to make boundaries in your head, or where do the boundaries lie?
It's an ongoing challenge for me, and I'm very grateful for some amazing friends that know how to pull me away from work and get me to pause, because I think otherwise I'd be stuck at the computer all the time investigating and trying things and reading things and whatever else. For me, going to the gym, honestly, has been the best sort of way for me to step away and create some of those boundaries, and having goals there, and to obviously move my body, because otherwise I'm sitting down all day, and that's just basically as bad as smoking a packet of cigarettes every day, I think they say, or something like that. Don't smoke, which is great, but do sit. So yeah, the gym has been great. I have a balance between doing weights and doing some cardio, and that cardio is even just jumping on the treadmill for me, downloading a Netflix show, because honestly I think that's probably the only way that I really do watch TV other than scrolling TikTok and Instagram. But it's that sort of balance of what information's fed to you, but to be able to switch off, it's going and walking and watching something there. But there's also, on those rough days when things maybe aren't going, you're not getting through the problem, or you're not having that clarity as well. For me, going to the gym is, you can pick something up and you can pop it back down, as simple as it is, but that's also something of great achievement from your body and to be thankful for. So, and I'm having gratitude for that as well, that I can do those things. That's one boundary. And big long walks with friends, being outside, going along the Yarra. Lockdown was an amazing start actually for that for me. Lots of us, I think, started to do that, but I try and continue that through a friend of mine. We'll message each other and be like, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's get out and have a chat, and we talk about whatever's happening in her life, and I chat about what's happening in mine. We chat all the time, but it just gives us that space to step away from things and vent if we need to, or go down random tangents. Often there's a coffee pickup and an apple Danish maybe from the local cafe that we like to do. And I'm really lucky. I'm very close with my family. I think I've mentioned my mum many times in this chat already. She's a great way of taking time out and spending time with family as well. So mum and dad, and of course the family dog Bronte, our mini schnauzer, who's 12 now. And so having her around is amazing as well. She's probably not as much up for big long walks anymore, but belly rubs and giving her some kibble and whatever else to keep her entertained and annoying her is also what I'm pretty good at. There's some ways that I sort of keep some boundaries, but it's hard. I certainly go through moments, and probably towards the end of the year, we're fast approaching, I'm sort of starting to feel that burnout and needing to go, hang on, I need to take a break and take a holiday, which is often very difficult for me to do, because you think, oh, well, if I'm away and I'm not working on these projects, then I'm not helping people. It's all going to fall to pieces. And that's part of the learning as well for me too, because I am so passionate about what I do and be able to contribute and not wanting to hold other people up with their work or delivery of anything. It's that balance of accepting that, okay, taking a week off is going to be okay. Even if you take two, like, well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
a learning process for me.
That's really interesting. I think the time that you take off is obviously turbocharges what you do when you go back as well. So it's obviously, it's important to do that. Are there any other sort of principles or rules that you live by within your work that help you with the boundaries of creativity within your work?
I'm always saying, like, when creating work, like, work smarter, not harder. The time that I do spend investigating and learning and talking to other people about how do you do things? How do you do that? Oh, where did you get that resource from? That all helps. And so I've become far better, I think, in terms of boundaries before starting something, thinking through what's the task and have I done something before? Have I seen something else before? Can I leverage a tool, or how can I quickly mock something up to be able to get me further along, using those sorts of things as tools and resources to basically push it along. And I think that's where I love talking to people, because you hear of different stories of things that they've worked on that then influence, and you can call upon those ideas for work that you're doing. And in terms of boundaries for, like, pushing back even on work, there's been some work when I was at NAB and I was really, like, myself, my lead that I was working with, and even the junior at the time that we were working with, the BA, we were all saying, like, we need to do it this way instead, and there's no point doing all this work because the rules are going to change and it just doesn't make sense to do it. And asking the question of how many people is this actually going to affect? Can someone please just get us that data? Can someone find it for us? Almost dragging your knuckles a bit on some of the work to create that friction and slow things down a bit until someone can actually get you that answer. And despite other stakeholders that you might be working with saying, oh no, we have to do this. This is imperative that we do it this way. This is the way that we've said that we're going to do it. We have to deliver this thing. And it's like, yeah, but it's not going to work the way that you thought it was. Those are sorts of, drag your knuckles a little bit when appropriate, when you're really gung-ho and 100% sure on you've got all the understanding of the effects and impacts that a project will have. So in fact, finally asking that question of actually how many people this affect each month. When I was at NAB, it turned out to be something like 2 people. And I was like, so we can't pick up the phone and just talk to those 2 people rather than spending however many hundreds of thousands of dollars on this process that you want to build. Is it really worth it? Just trying to save some money here. Just trying to use some logic. We still need humans for some stuff. So drag your knuckles a little bit. That'll be my new tagline.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, like, as a designer, you're always you're in an organization, and then sometimes there's a direction that's given and the team's assembled, you're in that space. You're trying to figure out where it's going, but it's almost been decided. And sometimes you do need to make a point of it and actually ask some of the more obvious questions, it feels like. Because, like you say, it's not always making sense, particularly when you go into it, you do a bit of research, you're getting into the process of design, and if it's not working, it's not working, and somebody's got to call it. So I'm interested in hearing about your point of view, obviously, because you work within the banks and MYB as well, and other places as well. How you go about bringing people on board with, I guess, your thinking, your train of thought? How do you position your point of view when you come from a creative background, other people don't? How do those two worlds blend and mix? How do you get through that?
It would be show, don't tell. Transparency and good communication are 2 things that I wear my heart on my sleeve. What you see is what you get. I call a spade, maybe a spade, I don't know. No. But, I call it how I see it, and having that transparency and openness. And I'm always saying, like, this is the way what I've found, and let me walk you through it. This is where we're at today at this point. Things may change in the future. We may have missed something, and having that openness to say we're not always right. Maybe they've seen something or experienced something else. There are some people that are at particular jobs and companies for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. The people have different experiences. But I think it's always like taking them on board to say, hey, this may have been what you've seen in the past, and you might be very hesitant to say no because of what we present. But I want you to have an open mind and be like very, let me take you through this and see how we see it based on people that we've spoken to, what we know already. And so having that transparency, and also visually, everyone I think can relate to visuals. We're in a visual world very much. So taking them on the journey of how did you get to where you are today, and your thinking behind it. And I haven't yet met anyone that doesn't love zooming around a Figma file or a sketch file. If you are, being part of it and seeing the evolution as well. They're really key parts of how I find people, I get them on board, and always having that open door policy of, if you got a question, come back and ask me. Like, no question's a dumb question.
And tell me about feedback and how you handle it, because sometimes it's invited, sometimes it's not, right?
What do you
And
mean, Chris? I never take feedback. No,
no,
none
you
here.
don't. You don't do it. You just got to stop
I
the
just don't
question
do
right
it.
there.
Yeah.
But if you're creating all this wonderful work, you come from fine art and industrial design background, you're going to have pride in the thing that you make. And so more often than not, you're going to have people coming in with absolutely no idea about what it takes to make something and to put that level of thought and effort into creating something to the extent that you have. So how do you, maybe this was different throughout different parts of your career as well, but how did you learn the process of working with feedback?
So one of my first critiques is ingrained in my mind was at art school. So I did fine art first and then I did industrial design. And we had to put up a piece of work that it was within one of the first few weeks of first year. We had to put the work up that we'd done previously outside, or what a piece that maybe helped us get into the course. And I put it up and I got roasted. And I just turned 18. I was so proud of the work that I did. The school loved it. I got a great grade. I thought that was everything. And I got roasted. I ended up in tears. I was so heartbroken. And that was like the real cutting point for me of like feedback and how to take it and how to grow from it and learn from it as well. That was like the biggest learning part for me of taking feedback. So today, now when I get feedback, nothing's as worse as someone critiquing your work like that. But I've also learned, I think, that storytelling side and being able to check yourself as well, to say, leave your ego at the door, leave whatever you think that you might think, oh, this is the world's best design. Maybe that's where the imposter syndrome stems from, or it's just being chill about it now of like, well, yeah, cool, I'm not going to lose sleep over this. I think the benefit as well, like of now being in this digital world, I was very fortunate when I was at Stacks, which is all in one cloud platform, was that you can change things really quickly in code and push it out really quickly and make the change. So it's not the end of the world. Certainly in industrial design, when you're creating tooling, you want to get that stuff right. You don't want to stuff that up because it's a very expensive thing, and that's why it's fantastic. They've got 3D printers and prototyping and everything else like that. But there's always a way of a conversation to say, cool, like let's try it your way, or let's try it this way or our way, or whatever it be first, and learn and see. A/B test. Like, I don't know, like I'm not so upset about things anymore. What I do value though is when if someone's giving feedback, it's doing it in a way to not poo on someone's work. It's how can they evolve and develop from it and make changes and see those changes as well. I think that's really important. Through mentoring as well, people ask me all the time for portfolio feedback and their website and things like that. And I say, look, I always preface it of saying, this is just how I see things. This is not the be all and end all of things. Someone may have a different view of it. It's your job in trying to gather all those things and make a decision of what path forward you're going to take. I apply that same mentality to my own work as well. Like at the end of the day, like I have to make a decision, but I've got to align with product owners and BAs and whoever else in the business. But we all have to be aligned on the path forward and be able to check yourself with particular things. Am I going to lose sleep over it? No. Is something going to end up in a customer's hand in a better state? Amazing. One of the current product owners I work with, he'll probably laugh at me for saying this, but we can't leave it any worse than it already is. I think that's the thing, is like whatever we're doing, we're shifting it, even moving the needle slightly of just improving it from where something is. I haven't heard of many stories of like it was completely a disaster. We had to roll the whole thing back. That's usually because of some bug or something like that. So whatever we are investing our time designing in and creating in and researching in, we're moving something forward for the better.
The feedback is always there if you look for it as well. You can find ways to justify the work that you're doing. Obviously, you can use it to evidence the work that you're doing and really support a case for changing it if you need to change it as well. So I think that's in our tool set as designers, but it's often overlooked that it is interpretative in one way or another, and the feedback is always going to be there. But I think it's also interesting to think about how we can set the stage for the right type of feedback to come in at the right time, and how you can set expectations within stakeholder groups that you work within, leadership. How do you invite the right input at the right time? Do you work with some of those things? Do you have thoughts in your head, techniques, anything like that you think are useful?
I think Figma's great for that as well. It's an open thing. I don't like closed teams. I think it's, what have you got to hide? Everyone works for the same for the same company, set top secret projects. Really? Are they? There's always whispers. People always talk. So I think that's the transparency side of things. It's just an open door for me. That's the culture that I really like to be in, and the culture that I always advocate for of just be open.
Did you ever work in a culture where it was known that it was somebody's idea and it was attributed to one person? And has that changed for you now that you're working within teams and it's more about what you can do together? How has that changed for you?
Certainly, like industrial design is like that, right? It's like, oh, I'm the designer of this product. I did this packaging. But I feel like I've been very fortunate, like with the places that I've worked, it's always been a team. One part that stands out to me is working at Braun, depending on where you are in the world. But they initially used to have for each product a list of who the designers were that worked on it. It might be 2 or 3 people. And they changed that completely to be, can't remember exact time, but when he joined and was starting running the studio there and everything, he said, like, we're a design team, everyone contributes to it, to the product, whether it be through a conversation, whether it be in passing. It's like, oh, look at this part line, or what do you think about that? There is always some contribution from everywhere else. And I've been really fortunate, even when I was working in packaging design at Amcor, Aurora, you were sitting together amongst other designers and it was the same thing. I've been very fortunate where I work that you always get collaboration, and it's not just like, oh, Sarah did this. That's one thing I particularly really love and was attracted to by the digital UX, UI, create this digital world of community as well, is that it's not me that did this. It's we as a team, because there are so many moving parts. There's engineers, there's product owners, there's product developers, designers and design research, content writers, marketing people. It's a collaborative effort. Yeah, you may have someone who shines through sort of leading or charging this, but I've been really fortunate to work in bigger teams. If there was someone that says, oh, I did this, I'd probably be like, dude, check yourself. Did you really? You get to say you did all of it?
Yeah, that's on the resume, but maybe not said out loud. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. I think it's important to highlight like the parts that you greatly contributed to. I always say that when I'm mentoring people, is like, cool, great that you say that you did this amazing project. It's a 2-week project or something, whatever it be. But I really want to know the part that you really contributed to. Was it the design system? Was it the research? Was it a particular flow? I think there's ways that we can get better at communicating that. And that's often, when you're presenting at a workplace and providing that for, presenting, calling that out. It was great that Chris was able to do this part. He really stepped us up with understanding customer journey path or something like that. And Sarah's contribution to the UI or the chaos was fantastic. We really needed that.
Absolutely right. And as you're talking, I think thinking about what drives people is also at the heart of it. What motivations are there? What acknowledgement are they looking to receive in one way? Can you tune into that? Do you know what kind of feedback you could give to them that would really help lift somebody up, lift them up on one day, particularly in a low moment? It's being aware of your environment a little bit as well. What sort of things, from your personal perspective, what really drives you, inside through some of those tougher times? What do you feel keeps you going?
Not just coffee and apple danishes.
Yeah.
That's one part. And patting dogs. Look, there have been some really tough times. Do I stay? Do I go in a jog? Why am I doing this project? This is not fun anymore. Typically, it's the people that I'm around that get me to stay. It's them sort of taking on the leading light and holding that torch forward and maybe driving things a little bit harder, and I step off the gas and become the passenger, which is good. More recently, I've been reflecting on what is it that I want to learn? How can I push through some of these challenges that are in front of me? Do I need to actually pull away from work a little bit in terms of, because I'm typically so in, how do I actually put more into some of those boundaries and be a bit tighter with it, being like, look, I'm going to jump off and go for a walk. I need to do this for my mental health, talk about it through, those sorts of things. There's some of the ways that I've more recently been really a bit firmer about. And then finding other people who at the moment it's my manager and I as designers working on the Bendigo banking app. There are other designers in the space, but we're not really connected so much. So it's trying to reach out to them as well and build those connections. Maybe I'm not looking in every corner. I describe things as an adventure. Design and art is an adventure. It's not a journey for me. It's going from A to B, but an adventure is the way I describe it. Is like if you've played Pokemon, it's exploring a map and you've got to go down one way and you sort of see what's out there, and then you come back to go to explore another way and acquire some Pokemon. I'm a real gamer, not. But this is the sort of like the best analogy that I've been able to gather. It's sometimes like I'm actually checking yourself and going like, oh, maybe I've just gone too far down this hole or down this pathway and need to pull myself out and start to look elsewhere to be able to, how can I solve or pick that main character or something like that it's not main character, it's a project. How can I get through this? I've started calling it the lawyer way of looking at things.
What's that?
So the lawyer way for me is almost taking your emotion out of things and parking that and going, cool, okay, you're very emotional about this. Let's look at it from the other perspective of how the business sees it, how another customer, I don't know, whatever sees it, and parking those emotions and looking for something, looking at it basically a different way and trying to assess it. So any idea that you may have thought of a way to solve it was like you have to go like an immediate no, you've got to argue almost against yourself. These are some of the ways at the moment that I've sort of been working through challenges that have been in front of me. And I guess it's the maturity of that and experience as well of talking to people, experiencing life in different environments, different workplaces, all of that, that you sort of, if you asked me that question when I was just finished university or something like that, I wouldn't have these skills and I wouldn't know how to answer those questions. And it's that time and working and being around other people that you sort of learn these things, but you also learn about yourself.
Creativity is also definitely a superpower in one way or another. And sometimes you can control it, sometimes you can't. And it feels like in a work context that can be put under pressure a lot of the time too. So how do you manage that? If you're in a really kind of low period, what can you do to kind of spark it? Or do you just accept that it's not going to fly today and that's it?
I kind of just accept it's not going to fly today, because the next day it might be up again. And I need to accept that's how I was feeling. It is what it is, and accept those feelings and emotions and just start the new day again and go. I know there's some people that would say, like, why wait for a new day? Why start the diet tomorrow? Start it today. That sort of thing. And look, maybe you don't have the time to wait till tomorrow to sort of find that motivation. Go to the fridge, go get a slice of cheese if you're not lactose intolerant, and a couple of biscuits, and then go for a walk and call a friend, call your mum, call your dad, call someone that you care for and have a chat. Taking 20 minutes, half an hour out of your time is not going to be the end of the world. I've learnt to the outcome that you're going to deliver. Just venting can be really healthy and helpful to get you going again. Probably need to often take some of my own advice.
I was thinking, as you get older, you always feel like you have to become more self-sufficient in a way and less reliant on other people. But actually, that conversation is really important still. And you've got to remind yourself that that's an option sometimes, because when you're experienced and you've done all these things, you think you can take it on yourself, but it might not lead you to any better place necessarily. It's sometimes that other perspective that really helps just nudge it back into shape.
I'm very grateful for some of my friends who aren't designers, because they ask questions and you kind of go, oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Didn't think about that. Or, oh, why did you think like that? And yeah, discover things different. And that can give that a new light of when you sit back down to go work through something, a project or a problem that you're working on. It's like, oh, yeah, let's try that avenue. Or what about that? Try this way of building it.
You'll be pleased to know that's it for the deeper questions. But before we go, I've got to ask about the microwavable egg. you've dropped some culinary references into the chat, and yeah, let's talk a bit about that just to finish this off, because I don't know what you've tried, but let's hear about it.
So those that know me know that I'm not a very good cook. I do own a pan, but I do also own a microwave. And so because I'm not the world's best cook, and often because I'm time poor and because I'm working on projects and things like that, I just haven't really got that desire to cook. Making eggs in the microwave, great way of getting a source of protein, but you have to be careful. Otherwise, you're going to have exploding eggs, and that's not fun to do. So for all those people wanting to microwave some eggs, I think the secret is, if you're wanting to do like poached ones, add some water to the bowl, do it in small incremental 20-second sessions, open the door to let out some of that steam that builds. And you'll be on your way to having some good eggs. Those that want to do scrambled eggs, having a bit more egg whites in does reduce the explosion. And again, look, it's not the same as doing it in a pan, but it's a one bowl, couple of seconds, real easy cleanup for if you're on the go.
If it goes right.
Yeah, if it goes right, if it explodes, which has happened many times over the years. You're going to need to clean up on aisle 12, whatever it is, for all the microwaves. But if it microwaves, it's great for me.
There we go. No, that's good. That's an adventure in itself. You talked about adventure before. You can equate Pokemon to experimentation for sure. That's just one of those things. But really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Sarah. Just before we go, maybe tell people a bit about how they might be able to reach you if they've got a question, if you're happy to have people reach out just to say hello, ask a question. What's the best way to reach you?
Please do. Please reach out. I love a good chat. Find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Sarah Mote. There's only a couple of us. I'm usually the one that's got a black outfit on. I wear black. Otherwise, on Instagram, send me a message, S_Mote. That's where I am. I'd love to hear from people and have a good chat and talk design and hear all the things and learn from you guys as well.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate your time today. And it's just kind of set my mind racing about all the things that I can be doing now. So I think it's brought a sense of creativity, a sense of possibility to my day and my morning. But I know it will do the same for the listeners as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me on as well. It's been great.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and share this episode with your friends, team members, leaders, if you think it'll make a difference. After all, we're trying to help you, the entrepreneurs, kick more goals within your organisations. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show, please email me directly at chris@companyroad.co. I answer all messages, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And to hear about the latest episodes and updates, please head to companyroad.co to subscribe. Tune in next Wednesday for another new episode.